Chapter 1: The Remote Outpost. In the heart of rural England, far away from the buzz of city life, stood a nondescript building nestled among the gnarled trees and sweeping fields. This was Dani's new world, a far cry from the exhilarating life he had once known inside the roaring belly of a fighter jet. The building was an outpost, its purpose hidden beneath its plain exterior, with technology humming quietly inside. Here, Dani spent his days in a dim chamber bathed in the light of screens, guiding drones over landscapes he could only see from afar. The air inside was cool, almost sterile, contrasting sharply with the wild green outside. A quietness hung over everything, the silence broken only by the soft tapping of keyboards and the occasional rustle of a shifting chair. Flight Lieutenant Daniel "Dani" Andrews had spent countless hours in this room, surrounded by screens and the heavy burden of his role. Each mission brought with it a certain gravity. His fingers moved deftly over the controls, directing the drones on paths invisible to those below. The battlefield was a pixelated expanse stretched across the screens, dotted with coordinates that held lives in their bounds. Dani was the invisible hand that determined which would change. His colleagues regarded Dani with a respect born out of his steady demeanor. Even in crises, when tensions ran high and decisions needed to be made with precision, Dani remained the calm eye of the storm. To them, he was a model officer, his composure unyielding, even enviable. But inside, Dani felt the quiet tremors of doubt and unease growing stronger. The detachments, both physical and emotional, came with their own pain. Unlike the cockpit where he had once felt every dip and rise, sensing the pressure of human presence, here in this room there was only the stark isolation of his seat. The decisions rested solely on him, the aftermath unfolding far away, never to touch him directly, and yet the echoes of each command stayed with him long after the missions ended. Outside of work, the loneliness deepened. The pastoral surroundings seemed indifferent to his plight, and his attempts to connect with family or friends often faltered, their understanding limited to what they imagined of military life. He was a mystery to them, his role distilled into oversimplified terms. And so, Dani found himself often drifting into inward reflection, contemplating the strange irony of his position. Here he was, a guardian of the skies, yet weighed down by choices even with the clear skies above. The drone missions carried a purpose, a necessity he had sworn to uphold. But the cost, especially the personal one, was becoming harder to bear. One night, after a particularly strenuous mission had concluded, Dani lingered in the room, his eyes resting unfocused on the screens, the pixels forming an unreadable jumble. He reached into his bag to retrieve a worn notebook, the leather cover soft and familiar in his hands. It was a diary he had begun to keep, a small refuge where his thoughts could unravel without scrutiny or consequence. He scribbled a few lines, articulating the conflict that simmered beneath his skin. As the words sprawled across the pages, he felt a flicker of relief. Even if nothing changed, even if the burden remained, articulating his fears and doubts seemed to ease their weight, if only a little. Yet this was just the beginning, and Dani knew the path to resolution was as nebulous as the paths he guided his drones along. Chapter 2: Ghosts of the Battlefield. The following morning, Dani awoke to the gentle light filtering through his window, accentuating the solitude of the room. The base was coming to life outside, with personnel moving briskly as they commenced the day's routines. Despite the pastoral setting, the underlying urgency of their work lent an edge to even mundane tasks. Dani prepared himself, his uniform feeling both like an armor and a shackle. He was tethered to his duty, unable to look away from the screens that dictated much of his life. Entering the operations room, he nodded to a few colleagues, their camaraderie forged in mutual understanding of the pressures they faced. Seated at his station, Dani checked the mission briefing flashing on the largest screen. Coordinates and intelligence reports scrolled past in neat lines. His eyes skimmed the details, honing in on the objective. It was a familiar scenario by now, yet the stakes felt no less high than they had on his very first mission. Fingers steady, mind focused, he initiated contact with the drone, a mechanical bird soaring effortlessly above foreign terrain. The inevitability of his task settled in alongside the discomfort, a dichotomy he struggled to reconcile. He was aware that beyond these walls, well-meaning civilians protested the very technology he now commanded. The drone's camera painted a vivid picture of the landscape below, barren and scarred in places. It seemed surreal, a world of stark contrasts captured in shades of gray and green. The screen was alive with data, coordinates shifting and aligning as if engaged in a dance with fate, each movement laden with significance. Dani's target today was labeled as a high-value individual, a faceless presence described in brief yet imposing terms. The analytical intelligence had pieced together a grim portrait based on intercepted communications and satellite imagery. A necessary mission, he told himself, an act that could prevent untold harm. Yet he wrestled with a nagging unease that pulled at the fabric of his conviction. As the drone hovered silently above the target zone, Dani's focus tunneled down to a pinpoint. His surroundings faded away, leaving only the screens and his reflexive calculations. Time seemed to dilate, stretching out as he confirmed the identity markers against the intelligence at hand. Then came the command sequence, a series of decisive taps and confirmations. The drone responded with unwavering precision, accepting the instruction without question. Dani watched as the screen captured the arcing trail of a missile descending upon its target with unerring accuracy. The explosion was both an end and a beginning. He felt the familiar chill travel up his spine, a reminder of the life that had been extinguished at his behest. The room remained silent, yet Dani could almost hear the reverberation of his actions like distant thunder. Despite the emotional tug, he continued monitoring, ensuring the mission's completion and safe disengagement of the drone. The formalities observed, he finally took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment to process. It was a ritual of sorts, an interlude before the clamor of doubt crept in once more. After the mission debrief, which felt perfunctory in addressing the deeper concerns gnawing at him, Dani retreated outdoors. The crisp air was a welcome balm, contrasting starkly with the heaviness inside. He strayed into the nearby woods, their tranquil beauty offering a semblance of solace. As he wandered, he stumbled upon a small clearing, its grass trodden flat by survivors of storms long past. Dani sat down amidst the whispering leaves, considering the notion of change, of finding his way out of these moral quagmires. It was then that his mind wandered to his fellow colleagues, to the few who seemed to understand the shadows that haunted him. Chapter 3. An Unexpected Ally. One evening, amid a quiet week at the Outpost, Dani was approached by Flight Officer Helen Ward, a spirited pilot known for her candor and infectious laugh. They had always been amiable, sharing the usual banter, but Dani sensed there was something more she wished to discuss. "Got a minute, Dani?" she asked, her voice not quite matching the smile on her face. Her eyes, a sober shade of blue, reflected more depth than usual. "Of course," he replied, motioning for her to join him at the small station. They walked down the narrow corridor of the base, finally settling in a secluded alcove away from prying ears. Helen's expression shifted to one of concern, a serious shadow falling over her usually buoyant demeanor. "I noticed you've been a bit out of sorts lately," she began, her voice gentle yet probing. "It's hard not to see it when you fly every day, watching as we do." Dani paused, struggling with how much to reveal, but there was something about her genuine interest that encouraged honesty. He took a deep breath and let his defenses slip, if only for a moment, sharing the internal conflict that had grown too large to ignore. "I can't shake the feeling that I'm losing a piece of myself with every mission," he admitted, his voice more strained than he'd intended. "The screens, the distance, it makes it too easy to forget the impact, the lives affected." Helen nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's tough, this line of work. The clarity we strive for doesn't always come easy, does it?" "No, it doesn't," Dani answered quietly. "I used to find comfort in the idea that I was keeping people safe, that every mission made a difference. Now I'm not so sure." Sitting with him in silence, Helen let him wrestle with his thoughts, giving him the space to articulate the hard truths he rarely voiced. "I think you should talk to someone, Dani. It helps, you know. Not just me, a professional." Her suggestion weighed on him, the practicality and kindness evident in her tone. Perhaps he had been too stubborn, too insular in dealing with this alone. He considered her words, feeling a flicker of relief that someone had validated his struggle rather than minimize it. "Dani," Helen added, her voice tinged with determination. Finding an outlet, even a small one, is crucial. You've got more support here than you realize. Her words planted a seed of hope within him. Maybe, just maybe, he could find his way through the shadows with some guidance and support. Helen's sincerity resonated, and he felt a newfound determination to confront his inner conflicts. Chapter 4. The Diary and the Book. Buoyed by Helen's encouragement, Dani began to embrace the idea of seeking help. He reached out to one of the base's counselors, someone he hadn't spoken to before, but whose reputation for empathy preceded them. The counselor, Mr. Kavanagh, was a seasoned professional who understood the unique pressures of remote warfare and the unseen toll it could take. Their sessions were initially challenging, with Dani reluctant to unravel the tight threads he'd wound around his feelings. Yet as he opened up, the catharsis brought clarity, allowing him to discern the intertwining strands of duty and morality that defined his conflict. Conversations with Mr. Kavanagh became a lifeline, giving his turmoil a voice and helping to navigate through the cacophony without judgment. Beyond these sessions, Dani found another ally in books. Among the small library tucked in a corner of the base, he discovered philosophical novels that explored the nature of war, ethics, and the human condition. Pages turned under his fingers like balm to his unsettled thoughts, offering perspectives as varied and complex as his own reflections. One book in particular deeply resonated with him. It was a novel centered around a soldier's introspective journey during wartime, illuminating uncertainties and ethical dilemmas akin to Dani's own. Through the soldier's internal dialogue, Dani found echoes of his questions mirrored back at him. As the seasons shifted gently from summer to autumn, Dani's diary began to fill with excerpts and quotes from these books, alongside his own musings. It became a tapestry woven with threads of his struggle, insights gleaned from therapy, and affirmations found in literature. Writing each night, Dani allowed himself to explore scenarios and philosophical inquiries previously avoided. What defined a justified action in the haze of war? Could moral ambiguity coalesce with strategic objectives, or was the conflict itself an unending battleground? Each page became a symbol of his evolution, a testament to the inner battles being waged and slowly reconciled. Chapter 5. Choices and Consequences. Though Dani found solace in these new outlets, every mission still brought with it the familiar weight of responsibility. He realized he needed to face his role in broader terms, acknowledging both the necessity and the moral quandaries it entailed. A pivotal moment arrived during a mission that once again required acute precision, the target buried deep in a civilian-populated area. Intel had confirmed the threat, but emphasized extreme caution to minimize collateral damage. As he prepared to guide the drone, Dani experienced a palpable tension between duty and conscience. As he sat before the screens, fingers poised over controls, a thought anchored itself firmly in his mind. Perhaps the essence of his existential battle wasn't choosing a side but acknowledging their coexistence. Opposing forces contributing to the decisions now in his hand, where discernment and humanity had to guide the technology he wielded. The strike was executed with unparalleled precision. The threat neutralized with collateral impact kept to a bare minimum, a result of not just technology, but Dani's sharpened judgment and moral resolve. In that moment, Dani felt a profound shift, an understanding that his place within this system didn't negate his humanity, but embraced its complexity. In the aftermath, Dani reflected on the decision. It had been far from simple, yet he recognized a newfound confidence in navigating his duty, acknowledging that conflict and peace often walked hand in hand. Chapter 6. Light Breaking Through. Months passed, and Dani's internal journey carried him towards a balanced outlook. The lessons gleaned from his counselor and literature hadn't eradicated his doubts, but they had transformed them into guiding principles. They served as reminders of an innate responsibility to engage with every mission thoughtfully and with compassion. Dani eventually approached his commanding officer to discuss the emotional implications of their work, advocating for broader access to mental health resources and forums for dialogue within their team. His openness sparked discussions among colleagues, fostering a community where personal struggles became shared stories, lightening the load for others who silently bore similar burdens. Through these efforts, Dani realized that the shadows he had feared were not just his. They were a shared challenge faced by many in his field. The understanding that emerged transformed solitude into solidarity, sparking meaningful changes within the small outpost and potentially beyond. Friendships deepened, a sense of camaraderie blossomed, and Dani felt a connection to colleagues like Helen and others, all sharing the weight and the day light together. As Dani packed his things one afternoon, readying for a brief leave with family, he felt a shift within, a settling peace where once there had been turmoil. His journey was ongoing, bound to the landscapes of distant lands through the screens, but no longer solitary. In accepting the shadows, he had found his own light within the complex tapestry of duty and morality. The drive back to the countryside resembled the opening of a new chapter. The fields outside appeared familiar yet transformed, illuminated by the dusk like the revelations Dani had unearthed within himself. The road ahead was not without its challenges, but now felt intertwined with purpose and clarity. Chapter 7. The Return and Reconciliation. The reunion with his family was filled with laughter and warmth. Away from the screens, Dani sensed a renewed understanding of his place in the world, an awareness of the broader implications of his actions, yet tempered with acceptance of their necessity. His family, once shielded from the complexities of his role, listened as he shared his experiences openly, forging a deeper connection with those he loved. And so, during a quiet walk with his younger brother around their childhood home, Dani spoke freely about his line of work, sharing both the burdens and the breakthroughs. His brother, eager yet apprehensive about what the future held for him, listened intently. "Does it get easier?" his brother finally asked, looking up at the fading sky, as vibrant as Dani's internal transformation. "I don't think it ever gets easier, but it gets clearer," Dani replied, reflecting on the journey that had reshaped him. "It's about finding balance between who you are and the responsibilities you carry. Trust me, you learn a lot about yourself along the way." As the last light faded into the night, Dani felt gratitude for the peace he'd found amid the shadows. He understood now that he held the power to navigate the spaces between with integrity and strength. Chapter 8. Looking to the Horizon. When Dani returned to the base, things felt different. The reflections, discussions, and growth he had experienced clarified that he was not just a part of the machine, but a human beyond the controls. His work continued, still rife with challenges and awaiting new questions about the nature of his duties. Yet with every mission, he carried with him the lessons and connections, a profound understanding of duty, not just as an obligation, but as a living, breathing journey entangled with conscience and connection. Encouraged by his renewed sense of purpose, Dani began facilitating workshops on ethical decision-making, inviting colleagues to explore the gray areas they so often encountered. It was an unexpected step, but it felt right. The room filled with fresh voices eager to question, to learn, and to grow, just as he once had. As he looked out over his fellow pilots, friends gathered in solidarity, Dani saw the power of collective introspection, knowing beneath every shared story lay the capacity for transformation. The room buzzed with dialogue, a testament to the environment they had nurtured together, a space where shadows could break, revealing the bright possibilities within. In that warmth and camaraderie, Dani embraced the future. Whatever came next, he knew he was not alone, standing with others on the precipice of conscience, their paths forever woven together in the pursuit of light.